Throughout my career as a project manager, I got so many questions about project management issues, challenges, and I try to respond to them based on my experience and my theoretical knowledge. People come to me because they know that I am excellent at what I am doing, and I resolved so many difficult situations to the point that people trusted me. So in this course, I'm trying to recapitalize all the information that I have in project management and giving advice, especially for those who are just starting project management or they are in the beginning of their journey in the project management field. So here I'm going to talk about different aspects of project management. First, I'm going to talk from a career perspective. Then I'm going to talk from business perspective. Then I'm going to talk about communication and leadership and move on to technical skills up to talking about the Agile approach. I'm sure I will respond to many of the questions that you think of. So keep watching and enjoy this course. How to get into a project management role. In order to be a project manager, there is two components: gaining the knowledge and acquiring some experience. In order to gain some knowledge about project management, you can follow online courses or offline courses by being present in class or remote live classes as well. And those courses will give you a lot of theoretical understanding and some technical ways of how to implement the project management in a proper way. Another way of learning about project management is following the processes within your company. If they have a training program in their internal company, if they have a PMO taking care of upgrading the skills of future project managers, you should take advantage of these programs. Third, you could find and look for mentors. Those mentors should be project managers with a few years of experience, either within your company, if your company is big, or in other companies. And that's maybe advantages because you're gonna discover other project managers, how they work in other companies, and you learn a lot from them. So it's easy in order to find a mentor. There is two kinds. There is free mentors and paid mentors. There are some websites about finding mentors, but you can easily reach out to people on LinkedIn and ask for 1 hour of their time in every month or every quarter, and you get their advices. So that's the third way of gaining knowledge about project management. If you'd like to read, there is also the option of reading books, reading the guidelines about how to practice the project management roles. There is some toolkits books, there is some for dummies books. So you can type project management in Amazon, for example, and you find a lot of project management books and even specialized in some areas. So this is about knowledge. Now, when it comes to experience, you have to practice the project knowledge from the beginning. If you are a developer, try to collaborate more with your colleagues, so your top management will notice that you have this kind of teamwork aspect, and you could be a future project manager. If you are a project, you can start your career by being a project coordinator, project assistant, or any kind of position that could interact with different departments or different other people in your organization. So in the future, you can demonstrate to your superiors that you have these kind of skills. But anyway, if you are still in your career at the beginning, you can just try to develop your skills, essentially the leadership skills and the communication skills, and slowly learn about the technical stuff. And over time, you will be ready for such a position, either within your organization or you have to move to other organization in order to move to another role. So this about your organization. But if there is no opportunity to practice such interactions within your organization, you can try working as a maybe volunteer in a nonprofit organization, NGO. So in this case, you can practice this aspect of managing projects and managing people, whether within an NGO or you could work part-time in another company in parallel, or whatever option you could find suitable. So these kind of activities could also lead you or facilitate the fact that you will be a project manager in the future. So remember, there is two parts: knowledge and experience. You start with knowledge, and over time you accumulate those experience in the leadership and communication styles that will help you being a successful project manager. Do you need a certification in project management? The answer is yes by pro certification and no by anti-certification people. So in this video, I'm going to explain why do you need a certification in project management and why not. So let's start with why not needing a certification. Actually, for those who are just starting their career and they don't know whether they will continue as a project manager or a project coordinator or in project management staff, they could think that they don't need a project management certification because shortly they may switch the career or the position, and project management could play no role in their career. So no need to waste their time and money into a certification that they will not need later on. So this is the first category of people that they don't know or they don't need a certification. Second, there are some people in the opposite side who think that they are going to continue practicing project management, but in their organization. So they don't think that the certification will add any advantages to their career, because they know that they will remain in their companies and they are satisfied with their company environment, salary maybe, and whatever it gives. So those people increase their skills by attending seminars and training programs, etc. But they don't think that a certification in project management could add any value. The third category is people who are intending to be a CEO or a chief executive, whatever, in technical or financial sector, etc. And transitioning to executive levels is not really requires certifications in most of the cases. So currently they are practicing project management, but they are looking to move to CEO staff or CTO staff, etc. position, and they don't like to spend time and money on certifications. Likewise, entrepreneurs as well, they might not need a certification, but they probably require their team to be certified in order to apply project management in a proper way. But themselves, they don't see themselves as potential people for getting a certificate because they are not intending to move to other companies or switching position or whatever, because they are already entrepreneur and having people working with them. So these kind of people are not looking for certificates or are not interested with project management certificates. If you are among them, maybe you are not interested as well. But some people who are in these positions and truly believe in the advantages of certificates, they can have different opinion. On the other side, usually for those who are looking for a project management certification are people who are tending to increase their salaries or to switch their position or move into a project management role. So if you are a programmer for many years and you'd like to be a project manager, then most probably you're gonna follow the PMP certificate in order to prove to your future recruiter that you would like to practice the project management position. So moving into a project management role requires probably a certificate in a project management. Also, if you'd like to increase your salary, there is a more chance that you get more salary if you are with a PMP certificate or other project management certificate. So these two main cases are the most known cases for looking for certificates. What are the most common project management certificates? Actually, there are many project management certifications, and those certifications differs in terms of your need. If you are a beginner or if you are an experiment project manager, you need different certifications. If you are working in the IT field with the Agile approach, or if you are working with the traditional approach, there are different certificates as well. So let's resume by giving the most known project management certifications in the market right now. For beginners, you could follow the CAPM certificate. This certificate is given by PMI Project Management Institute, and the CAPM is going to give you the basics of a project management book of knowledge issued by the PMI Institute. So the exam is going to be based on the 7th edition from 2023 and on the 6th edition before January 2023. So this is the entry level project management certificate. The exam of this certificate takes 3 hours, and you need a diploma, just a secondary diploma or a university diploma, whatever diploma you could have, in addition to 23 hours of learning, which is called contact hours. So this is the certificate for beginners or for fresh graduate students. The other certificates for professionals who are already in the practicing project management are either PMP or PRANS2. PMP is the most known and the most famous certificate. It has more than 1 million people certified PMP worldwide. This certificate is tough. It is difficult because the exam is very long. You have to sit for 3 hours, 15 minutes during the exam, and you need to have at least 3 years of experience, and you need to renew it every 3 years by acquiring 60 PDUs, which is professional development units. Every time you read something or you attend a conference or a seminar, you should convert 1 hour of learning into 1 PDU. So this certificate is widely recognized in the market. If you look for jobs in project management, you type PMP and you can find a lot of positions looking for certified PMP professionals. So this is PMP. After the PMP, there is PRANS2. This certificate is process-based. It's widely used in UK and a part of Europe. This certificate is recently changed into having 2 components, the Agile components as well. And for those who are intending to follow the methodologies and processes within PRANS2, this certificate is advantageous as well. Next, if you are working in the IT field, in the development side, maybe you might need to get an Agile project management certification. And the most known Agile project management certifications are ACP and PSM. ACP is provided by PMI as well, and this certificate is focusing on Agile, and it is based on the Agile practice guide issued by PMI as well. And the exam dures 3 hours, and its level of complexity is, let's say, medium. Compared to the PSM, it has 3 levels. PSM is Professional Scrum Master. It has a level 1, which is the basic one, which is very easy. The exam duration is 1 hour and you can get it easily if you know the basics of Scrum approach and the roles of Scrum Master. The second level tries to give an aspect of real life, how you implement Agile in companies, organizations, how you face situations within practicing this approach. And finally, the third level is a very complex level. The good thing about PSM is that it does not require to renewal it. Maybe it's good from the perspective of those who got the certificate because they don't need to invest any more time in renewing it. And the duration of the exam is less than the PMI exams. So these are the most important certificates right now. There is others certificates like the SAFE certificate or other kind of certificates, but these are the most known. For beginners, CAPM; for professionals, PMP and Prince2; for those who work in the Agile method approach, there is PSM and the ACP certificate. What are the most common project management interview questions? In this video, I'm going to demonstrate or showcase some of these questions and how you answer them correctly. So the questions are basically divided into two categories. The first category is behavioral questions, and the second category is technical questions. So behavioral questions are usually tell me more about something, or tell me there is something in situation that the interviewer expected, what's your behavior that was in that situation. So, for example, the interviewer can ask you, tell me about a situation in which the customer is unhappy and how you resolved that. So the interviewer is asking if you handled that situation well and how you resolved that issue or conflict. So basically, what you should answer in this case is that you should demonstrate how you communicate well, how you used your negotiation skills, leadership skills, and how you ended up having a good relation with the customer at the end while resolving the issue. Very important to not giving up too much in terms of delivering work beyond scope and stuff like that just to satisfy the customer. It's important that you demonstrate that you used your negotiation skills and you get something in order to give something. So this is a very important question that you should deal with. The second question you can get is about naming 3 characters or 3 values that makes you a good project manager in this role, or what people says about you. Tell me about 3 things in you. So this is more about knowing your values and knowing your qualities. So in order to answer this correctly, you should demonstrate what are the good values in you and why. Because if you said, for example, you have good attention to details, how you said that, why you said that, did you encounter such a situation in which people said that you have such a value? For example, you might notice something in your previous job and you bring that on table and people said, wow, that's great, you have a good attention to details. So that's one thing. If you are going to said something or say something about yourself, you need to demonstrate that through a real example. And while you are going to answer behavioral questions, you can also demonstrate your skills and your technical behaviors or your technical capabilities. But you should also expect that recruiters are going to ask you directly for technical knowledge. For example, they might ask you what are the Agile approach or how to implement the Agile approach if you are going to work with the Agile approach in the future. So they are expecting to know about the theories, also to know about the practices in your previous job. If you are applying the Scrum approach in your previous job, it's a plus for you, or it's advantages for you if you already know the theories and you already adapted those theories into your previous job and adjusted it according to your needs. That's very important that recruiters know that you have theoretical understanding and practical understanding, and you are not just sticking to theories. You just know the theories and implement it according to your needs. So that's one of the technical examples. Questions, you could encounter questions about managing remote teams. They ask you whether you managed a remote team before or dealt with remote teams. In such a case, you need to demonstrate how you communicated well with your teams, what tools did you use, and stuff like that. And try to be transparent. Don't create lies. Try to be transparent. If you did not work with remote teams before, say that in a direct way, and also say that you have the ambition to work with remote teams, and that's something that you don't worry about. So try to be transparent and try to demonstrate that you have already the qualities and the will to work and the things that your recruiter is asking for. So those are some questions. You can find two other many questions, such as what's your biggest achievements in the past, what things that you did not like in the past, or tell me a time you missed a deadline, and stuff like that. There's too many questions. If you'd like to learn more about questions and how to answer them correctly, there is some books on Amazon. There is plenty of books. Actually, just write interview questions, project management questions, and you will find a lot of great books. What's the difference between project manager, product manager, business analyst, project leader, and team leader? And other names maybe we don't know so far. So basically, with time, there is new names and new positions that appear on surface, and people get confused whether this new role or position same as the previous one or it has different responsibilities. So in this short video, I'm going to just explain the differences and what the main duties of these roles. Actually, we know the project manager as the traditional name for people who are intending to achieve the outcomes of the project by using or leveraging the resources they have, human resources, equipment, etc. And they use all these means in order to achieve the objectives. So this is basically the traditional definition of the project manager. And over years, the focus was changed into a more leadership role. So people sometimes don't prefer the word manage, they prefer the word lead. Because in lead, it's more about focusing about people rather than focusing about the outcomes. So here's come the project leader position because it puts more emphasis on people and how you lead the project through the people. So that's why this term comes. And at the end of the day, the project manager should be a leader, and the leader should also have a good management skills in order to succeed. So those both terms, a leader or a manager, could exist, but it has different meanings in different situations. Manager is someone focusing on processes, outcomes, etc. And leader, someone focuses on people. But in terms of qualities, a project manager should also focus on people, should also be a leader, etc. So this about project manager and project leader. Now about the team leader. Team leader is someone who is specialized in managing team only. Their scope of focus is on the team only, so they don't go beyond financial or procurement or stuff like that. They try to promote the morals of the people, satisfy their needs, and stuff like that. So this is the team leader position, and it could be part of the project. If the project is too big, there is too many people in the project, So a team leader could be part of the project in order to maintain the relationship between people and satisfy all their needs, like we said. And another way of seeing this position is in a matrix organizations, not really related to a project, the team leader. They could be related to a department. So this team leader tries to manage these people in the department. So all the people in that department are leading them. Next is the business analyst. So this is another position as well next to project management. It's a different position than the project manager. You know that at the beginning of the project, there is analysis and a proof that the project will succeed, or the return on investment of the project, and why this project will be implemented in the first place. So all these studies could be done by a business analyst. It could be done in collaboration with the project manager, but the main duties or responsibilities relies on the business analyst. The business analysts do all these studies in order to approve the need for the project or not. And if the need for the project is approved, the business analyst will collaborate with the project manager in order to achieve the outcomes of this project. Now, if the project is implemented and the product is created, if there is a product as an output of this project, now the role of the product manager to maintain this product. So the product manager as a position is wider than the project manager, because this person is going to be involved in the creation of the product and in the maintenance of the product. Actually, in the whole life cycle of the product. Even in the end life of this product, the product manager treats these aspects. So the product manager as a position is wider. So in two words, the product manager owns the product. We can find other name for a product manager, which is the product owner. The product owner comes in the Agile approach, and this person interacts with the project manager, which is called Scrum Master in this case. And those people are working together in order to succeed the product at the end. So this is basically the difference between these different names. And in order to understand these roles very specifically in a clear way, you need to read thoroughly the position, because probably you are going to find a team leader, for example, job description in this company different than in another company. So it's very important that you understand what's this role entails in this organization and what it entails in other organization before applying for a new position. What are a project manager's main duties? Actually, each project has a goal, and the project manager duty is to achieve that goal or the business value of the project. That's as simple as it might sound, but it involves big challenges and big responsibilities. So first of all, you need to understand your project very well. If you are new into the project, or if you are already in the project and the changes are evolving, you need to understand what's your project and what's the goal of your project and what business value it provides. So this is very important. You could refer to the project charter or to the sponsor or whatever means you use, but you should always keep focusing on the target, on the goal of the project. So this is the first thing, understanding the project and working on achieving its objectives. Second, you are not going to work on the project yourself, so you need a team. And it's very, very important that you acquire and engage your team. Acquiring the best team is a key for success. Whatever the size of your team, if it's small or big, acquiring a good elements and some people knowledgeable about the things that you are trying to create is very important to achieve the project goals. Over time, you are going to encounter difficulties with the team, they are going to interact with each other. And we all know the Chickman ladder says about the team performance. They start with the initiating phase until reaching the conflicting phase, then the performing phase, and then the adjourning phase. Once your team is acquired and managed, you need to think about creating processes. That's very important because, the project manager is responsible for making things in order. So, in order to make things in order, you need to create a processes and maintain those processes. For example, if you are following the Agile approach, you need to maintain the practice of having the stand-up meeting at the same time in the same place. And you need to maintain the practice of doing a retrospective at the end of every sprint, doing a sprint planning, and etc. So this is the responsibilities as a project manager who is going to maintain the process. It's also important that you document the process. When I say that you document the process, it does not mean that yourself as a project manager should write down all the process. You can delegate this to someone else in your team. When you document the process, your team will get a clear idea who will do what and in what order. This will help them about understanding the responsibilities, understanding what we should do and at what pace, at what time, etc. When I worked as a project manager in a Agile team, or let's say Scrum Master, I used to document the process when working on GitHub. When we create an issue, in which column should we put that issue? Then when someone is working on this issue or task, they should move it to the doing task. And I ensure that everybody in my team, everyone is understanding the process and applies it correctly. So that's the third thing the project manager should take care of. We said that the first thing is understanding the project. The second is acquiring a good team and maintaining their engagement. And the third thing is developing the processes. Fourth thing is wider. As a project manager, you should manage the constraints. We all know that the project will face a lot of challenges, and you will find that you will need more budget, for example. You will find that the deadline is very close and you might miss the deadline. So all these kind of constraints you have to manage. You might encounter someone who is doing a work which is out of scope, or a client is requesting something which is out of scope. How to deal with that? How to manage the priorities, how to manage these requirements. So your project might have external providers and you might reach out to them to negotiate a contract or to cancel a contract, whatever. So all this kind of stuff, whether it's a quality, it's a risk, it's a procurement, a schedule, scope, budget, all these kind of stuff are constraints for your project that you need to manage on a daily basis, and that relies on the project manager. As I said, the project manager is responsible, is the accountable, and they might have a team with them, which is usually called the project management team, who take care of this kind of stuff and report their work to the project manager. Do you need to have technical knowledge in the project you are going to manage? Well, actually, the answer could be yes and could be no. In the first place, if you are managing a small project, you may probably need to work technically on the project at the same time. In this case, you need technical knowledge. For example, if you are a project manager managing a website and you have just a team with you, one member or two members, so most probably you are going to create the content yourself or to adjust the images yourself or to just code yourself. So you are managing this one or two members, and you are also working yourself on the project. So when the project is very small, you can be a project manager with a technical background and you work on the same time on your project. Also, if the nature of the project requires that you know technical stuff of the project, that's also important because you are going to discuss with the sponsor about technical stuff. So you should understand technically how this is going to be performed in order to negotiate either it's within the scope or it's outside of the scope. And having technical skills or knowledge is important or is key in order to success your negotiation with the sponsor and the other stakeholders. On the other hand, if the project is so big, so complex, so there is no way that you understand technically what's in this case, the project manager could have this general idea about running a project in a proper way, but they don't really understand how the implementation takes place and the technical way of doing it. So in this case, the project team themselves are managing some parts, and the level of delegation is very high in this case. The project manager is only taking care about the KPIs, the numbers, how the project is running, what's the progress so far, and they delegate all the decision making about the implementation to their team. So in this case, those who are working with the project manager have a high level of decision making responsibilities because they know the stuff. And the project manager is only managing or supervising the whole team. In this case, the project manager don't have to be a technical person. So we have two cases, either for a very simple projects, very small projects, you can have and technical skills and practice and implement the project by your hands. Another side, the project manager could manage very big projects. In this case, they might not need a technical knowledge. But as a general rule, having a technical knowledge could help because at the end of the day, the more the knowledge you have, the more speak the same language with stakeholders and with your team. So it's a good thing that the project manager could have knowledge about the things that they work on. Should you work on a project you are not interested in? That's a very problematic situation. If you are not interested in a project, that's really, really a problem. But on the other hand, self-awareness is very important. You should be self-aware and know what you like and what you don't like. So in order to understand yourself, you can ask some questions. Am I interested in working in a such field? Am I interested in working with a such team or with a such a client? So these kind of questions will involve your feelings about things and will help you figure out whether you like what you are doing or not. Afterwards, you can ask, I'm going to work for free in this kind of stuff? Is this project aligned with my values? Sometimes you work in a project in which it does not align with your beliefs. So a project manager should be self-aware and should be authentic about what they want and what they don't want. And once they are sure about things that they don't like, they have the option. Either they work professionally and try to fulfill their engagement. So if you don't like this project, you should be ensured that not all days are spring. Sometimes your morals goes up, so sometimes it goes down. But at the end of the day, you have a professional fulfillment and you should fulfill your engagement as a project manager and achieve the goal of the project. So if you are handling different customer, if you are handling different team members, you should encounter that and try to overcome these difficulties and reach the objective of the project. But on the other hand, if you don't even really could encounter or overcome these difficulties, then you have to hand over your responsibilities to other project manager. You should be transparent, talk to your superiors and tell them, you know what, I don't like to work anymore on this project because this reason and this and this. So that's something you should do at a certain level, because if you are working on a project you don't believe in, most probably your enthusiasm will be dropped and your motivation to achieve the project success will be reduced, and this will be problematic not just for you but for your team, your stakeholders, and your sponsor and the whole project. So if you can't work anymore with this project, you can hand on the responsibilities to other project manager and explain to your superiors why you are going to this extreme decision and what makes this decision. And most probably they will discuss with you and try to figure out the situation, and they might understand your point of view and accept your excuses. So to resume the whole topic, try to be professional and engage and fulfill your engagement first. And if you can't really do that because of certain reasons, you can then go to your superiors and explain to them that you cannot work on them and hands over your responsibilities. How to succeed in your first project with no previous project management experience. Actually, when you are starting a project management career, you should first try to gain trust. Because, at the beginning, you are maybe better in something to the point that someone trusts you. And someone said, why not putting you as a project manager for the next project? So try to work with that someone, with that person who gave trust and gave confidence on you. So try to figure out who is this person and try to collaborate with that person, because most probably they are going to defend you and they are going to approve that his or her choice is correct by choosing you as a project manager. So gain the trust and collaborate with the person who chose you as a project manager, and also gain the trust of your team. Once you work with your team, try to achieve success at the beginning. Try to bring the early values in the project so you demonstrate to the stakeholders that you are doing progress and you are getting some results early on. So gaining trust is the first pillar. And next, you have to delegate. This is the most thing that novice project managers suffer from, because they do the work themselves. And once they get promoted to a project management role, they stick to that habit of doing things themselves. And this is really problematic, because you as a project manager have a team to do the work. So why do you do the work yourself and let your team just watching? So that's important that you delegate the work to your team. They will love this. They will like this. They are expected to do the work. They are expected to learn. So don't rely on your competencies and do the technical work yourself, unless it's required to do that yourself. You have seen that in other video. Otherwise, you need to delegate as much as you can and not just throw the tasks to your team and just watching. Try to support them. Delegation does not mean just to throw the work to others and sit back. It means that you give and you explain the work and you monitor the progress and you communicate with that person and you measure their involvement with the task. If do they really do the work as you want? They do really like the work you give to them? Is it fit to their competencies, to their skills or not? That's very important. So delegation is key for project managers in the beginning of their career, and achieving results earlier on and values earlier on is also a very important aspect. How many projects could you manage concurrently? Actually, the number of projects you can manage are between 1 to 5 projects. But that really depends on how big is the project and how complex is the project. If the projects are very small, very simple, more likely you are going to manage more than one project. But if the project is very complex, most probably you are going to manage just one project. It really depends with the project size and complexity. For instance, if you are managing a project with a wait time for a small project, it's waste of time if you just manage one project because maybe you submit the proposal for one institute and you wait the answer, so the project will be blocked for a while, and during that period you need to manage other projects in the same time, so you don't just sit and do nothing. So in this case, you manage more than a project, but in order to be more efficient, you should not exceed 5 projects. Because even those projects are simples, your focus will be distributed among all these 5 projects and you will lose focus over time. What's the stakeholder of this project? What's the objective? What's the progress? What's the status, etc. So you might drop some important features or some important components of those projects because you have to manage too many projects. So the key here, if you are going to manage too many projects, just remember that you have only 35 to 40 hours a week. And during that period, how much you can handle. So in order to manage a full-time member, it might take 10% of your time to communicate with them appropriately. So if you have too many members that you have to manage them closely, you will not have enough time, and more probably you are just going to get in touch in a shorter period, not convenient for the project to succeed, and you could reach a level in which you are overwhelmed with the many projects and your team will be dissatisfied and the projects may fail. So you should understand that when enough is enough, you say no to a new project, or you say no to continue working on all these kind of projects, because sometimes you take on a project which seems simple at the beginning, but later on it becomes complex and it requires more resources and more time. So if you are starting with 3 projects, let's say, and you feel overwhelmed over time, you can get in touch with your superiors and tell them, hey, I cannot handle those 3 projects at the same time. I'm sorry, I am losing focus. I'm not doing my responsibilities on the right manner. So asking them to reduce the responsibilities by removing one of your projects, for example, or just adding more people helping you managing those projects. So to resume this video, you can handle more than one project if you can too, and if you can achieve the business value of this project. If you cannot, just say no. How much project management should there be in a project? Is there a typical ratio? Actually, when you are managing a project, that really depends on the organization in which you are managing the project. In some organizations, they have a PMO, Project Management Office, or Value Delivery Office, in which they streamline all the processes, they create the documentation, they provide the guidelines, and for the project manager, they have just to follow the procedures, and that's it. So they take a lot of workload out of the project manager responsibilities, and that helps the project manager to focus on work actually, and they reduce the amount of project management that should be in their role. On the other side, if there is no PMO, if there is no value delivery office, the project manager should take care of all these kind of stuff, streamlining the process, and setting up all the templates and the documentation for managing the process appropriately. So, in addition to PMO, there is also other responsibilities that really depends on the project and on the organization that you are working on, for example. If you already have a team, then you don't need to go and hire new team members, do the interviews, try to know the new team members, manage them, etc. So that's other responsibilities that takes out of your charge. But if you need to develop your team from the ground up, then you need to go through all the processes of setting the criteria for acquiring your team and develop their competencies, building a bond with these teams, etc. So this whole work that adds up to your responsibility as a project manager. Also, having to acquire resources or materials to the project is also something that you should consider, and it adds up to the time of management of this project. So in some companies in the IT field, they are using the 10% rule of thumb for the time of management of the project manager. This rule tells that if you are managing a full-time job team member, then you have to give 10% of your time to manage this person. For example, if you are managing 5 team members working full-time, so you have to focus or to give 20 hours of your time per week to manage those 5 team members. This is by calculating 40 hours multiplied by 5 and then multiplied by 0.1, which is 10%, it gives 20 hours. So to resume how much project management is there to manage your project, it really depends with your organization and your project's complexities and project requirements and what entails in your project. How to handle a project with a limited budget. The limited budget issue is very problematic for many projects. They start with a defined budget, and then over time they discover that this budget is unrealistic, and the sponsor might not have additional budget to fund this project and lead it to success. And this is a very problematic situation. So how you can handle this? You can handle it by 2 levels. The first level is before the start of the project, and the second level is after the start of the project. So what you should do before the starting of the project? What you should first do is getting or having enough time to collect requirements. You don't jump right away on the execution, because you need to allocate appropriate time for gathering requirements and understanding the objectives of the project and the aims of the stakeholders. So that's very important, because that's the key success for the project. You will figure out what's the requirement budgetary wise, and you have to communicate that to the sponsor and stakeholders so they understand how big is this project or how much it requires. The second thing, if you all set and you define the plan very well, but afterwards when you start implementing the project, you discovered a new stuff and you discovered that this budget is no longer sufficient to achieve the project goal. So in this case, you should be transparent. So from the beginning, when you work on the status reports, don't demonstrate to the sponsor or stakeholder that everything is good. Try to be transparent as much as possible from day one. From the first status report, show them the real progress. Show them how much you spent. Show them if it's on track or off track. So don't be afraid of showing the real status. The early you intervene to correct the situation, the better. Don't postpone this situation until you will be stuck and you will not be in a comfortable situation to resolve it out. So during your execution, try to be very, very transparent about the progress of your project. And once you find out that you are not on track and your budget is not sufficient, try to limit your expenditure. Try to track every penny you spend on the project. If you are spending too much, try to limit your expenses or to track those expenses and figure out whether these expenses are going on the right or on the wrong direction. One other thing that you should consider is trying to get cross-functional team. By getting cross-functional team, probably your team member who is working on something could help on something else, so you don't need to acquire or recruit someone else for that task. So this way you optimize the execution of work by having a cross-functional team. But be careful, this is not to undermine the quality of your outcomes. That's possible, and the team member could get a sufficient training in order to do other stuff, and they have the time to, that's fine. Otherwise, if it's not possible, don't push for this option and undermine the quality of your product outcome. So these are some clues for confronting this situation. And the only thing that I could advise you is be transparent and collaborate with the sponsor, because he or she is the only person that could help you in such situation. How to deal with work overload. When you start working on a project, you might start with a few tasks. And during the day, these tasks get increased and increased and increased until it reaches a time that you cannot all achieve during that day, and you postpone them to the next day, and the same thing happens the next day until you reach a stage where you have a lot of tasks and you have just a limited number of hours, and you cannot by any means achieve all these tasks within your time limit. So what's the solution for this problem? Actually, what you need to do in this case, you need to first rely on processes. Use the software and the process automation tools. Use the technology. For example, for chatting, you can use the Slack or Microsoft Teams in order to chat with your colleagues, but also you can automate things. For example, if you have a new hire, you can send automated messages every week to remind your team of something, instead of doing those manually. If you are scheduling meetings, you can do recurring meetings on an automated way rather than manually try to figure out which is the best time and schedule a meeting every time. So try to use automation software in the different types of collaboration, communication. If you are using code management, you can use GitHub or you can use Bitbucket. You can use for project management software, you can use Trello, Jira, Monday, ClickUp, and so many softwares that can make your life easier as a project manager. So this is the first point. Try to automate your processes and try to use the software that facilitates managing your team and your project. The second thing is the communication. When you are going to communicate with your stakeholders and your team members, it's very important to be concise in your communication. So you don't waste time and you don't just do things wrong and you do things again because of misunderstanding. So communication is key. If, for example, a customer comes asking for some tasks or some requirements, try to understand when this task is required. Is it required to be finished by the end of the day or by the end of the week or by the end of the month? So try to discuss all these details with the stakeholders, all these details with your team members, and be concise in communication. because it will save a lot of time down the road. After having a good communication with all your collaborators, try to focus on prioritizing tasks and duties. You can take time with yourself. Try to make 1 hour that you don't have any meetings in it, just to sit in your office and think about all the tasks that you have as a project manager and prioritize them. If you have tasks with high urgency and high importance, then you can do these tasks right away. But if you have tasks with low importance and high urgency, you can delegate those. And tasks with low importance and low urgency, you can just eliminate those tasks. Try to eliminate any tasks that do not have any value. Why do on earth having tasks that do not have any value? Try to detect them. And you can only detect them if you sit by yourself and think deeply why you have to do those tasks in the first place. So that's important that you self-understand and to focus on what you are doing and prioritize those tasks. It will help you a lot. Finally, if you still have a lot of workload, even after prioritizing tasks, communicating stuff clearly, and automating all the processes, then it's time to say no. If someone comes and asks you for something or asks you for a favor, or you just discover that you are handling too much and you can not cope with that situation anymore, then you have to say no. Try to say no in an assertive way. Don't just be harsh with your colleagues or with your superior. Try to be assertive. If someone asks you for some favor, you can ask them, hey, you know what? I really have a lot of stuff to do and I have deadlines and I will be in a trouble if I don't meet the deadline. Is it possible that we discuss this matter later on in a few days, in a few weeks, and stuff like that? So they will understand that you are busy and you have to workload, and they will keep you concentrated on what you are doing. So this is kind of tips that you can apply in your day-to-day job as a project manager to encounter such situations. You have to automate processes, communicate well, organize your tasks, manage your tasks, and finally, if these don't work, say no. Could a project manager be also a resource on the project? Yes, but it's not a guarantee for project success. When the project manager is also working on the project, that helps in understanding the real status of the project, because they're not just knowledgeable in terms of technical stuff, but they're also practicing or executing the project themselves. And they know what's going on. They know all the details of the project and the implementation of the project. And when they discuss with stakeholders and a sponsor, they know exactly what's going on and they know the status. So it helps in these terms. It also helps in not relying 100% on the project team. So you are not dependent on them, since you can do some work yourself. Also, you can come up with your own estimations and you act as a team member of your team as well. These are advantages for being a resource on your project. But at the other hand, when you are a resource, you will find a difficult time outsourcing or delegating tasks to others, which is part of your job as a project manager. So if you are not going to delegate because you know that you can do that yourself, that's a real problem, because at the end of the day, you will end up doing more execution and less focus on the real management, on the real need for communication. And that's a problematic. You will lack delegating tasks, and you will lack doing so many duties that project manager should do, such as communicating with stakeholders, trying to build a good relationship with the different stakeholders, and trying to, manage the budget, manage the scope and stuff like that, because you are doing two tasks at the same time, managing the project and executing the project. You might lose focus and you might find difficult time making this project a success. So to resume, you can be a resource. And that happens to me as well. Web application project, I jump in and do some design work since I have basics of design and I work with Adobe products. So I created some design artifacts and blocked my team so they can continue develop the web application. But I find a difficult time doing the management stuff of planning, of managing the different activities of my team. So just to resume, it's possible that you do some work, but I really recommend that you do it on a punctual manner, just in case of need, not permanently, in order to continue practicing your duties as a project manager in a proper way. How to strike the right balance between project activities and support tasks. This happens when you are working on a project which is already part of it or all of it is already live and you have customer who is bringing you issues and you need to deal with those issues in a permanent manner. So when you are in this situation, you could be overwhelmed with the amount of work that maintenance and support could take. In this case, in order to be organized, you can rely on a ticketing system or help desk. That kind of system will help you a lot, really a lot in resolving those kind of issues. Because when you get this kind of issues, you are going to document them. And if you have already a template built into those systems, you can easily create a description that makes life easier for developers or for the people who are going to resolve the issues. In the past, I have used Odoo Help Desk, which is an obvious solution for us because we are using Odoo ERP at that time. And you can use whatever help desk system you can have or you can access in your organization. So when a request comes from a customer, you document it and you assign someone to take care of it. And now it comes to the second part. Who should take care of these issues? The support or maintenance activities is kind of irritating if someone or one person is dealing with all of these kind of tasks. Most probably they are not going to do a lot of things otherwise. So in this case, you can do a staff rotation and just either by do it task by task or by doing in a time manner. For example, this week, person A will take care of all the issues and the next week, person B will take care of all the issues, etc. So you can do this staff rotation technique in order to make it easy to manage all the support activities. How to win upper management support? Actually, this could be done by two main things. The first thing is you be visible and you build your network. You be visible by trying to showcase yourself in the events, trying to reach out to people in different levels beyond your boss, beyond your team. Try to reach out to the different management level on your company in different means. It could be an informal way or indirect way, such as attending after work events or attending ceremonies, events, or by just in the case of formal meetings and try to present yourself, try to ask questions in a conference or in a seminar. So these kind of things that could help you as a project manager to be known within your organization. And this could be done through networking as well. So if you are working in a big company, try to reach out to people by LinkedIn. Try to send invites to those people so they know that you are working with them in the same company, and maybe get in touch with them and discuss them on LinkedIn first. So in the future, if one day it happens to encounter them in person, you already know each other and you can engage in a discussion because you get in touch offline first. So reach out to people, talk to people, reserve some time for networking. I know that many project managers have a lot of work to do and they are focusing on their project, But in order to be successful and in order to get the attention of the upper management and get their support, you need to be visible and you need to build your network. Reserve 1 hour or sometime every day or every week in order to get in touch with people and build a bond with those people. So that's number 1. Number 2 is to be consistent. If you are doing a good work, you should be consistent in doing this. If someone heard about you that you are a good project manager this time, and in the future they also heard that you are a good project manager and you are doing your job very well and you are succeeding, so you build this kind of brand of a successful person, a successful project manager. And in the future, you will keep attention of the upper management and they will consider you for higher challenges and bigger projects. So try to keep consistent with what you are doing. If you are delivering a good work, be consistent and continue the good work. What to do when your project sponsor leaves? That's really a problem. You are a project manager, your only support in your project is your client or sponsor. So if this person lose interest in your project, this project could go nowhere. You are delivering or you are creating or you are working on a project for them. So if they are no longer interested, maybe your project will fail. So your first focus is to build a relationship with your client or sponsor and try to prevent of such thing to happen. Prevent that your sponsor leaves or your sponsor lose attention or interest. You can do this by having permanent meetings with your sponsor, your client. Try to get in touch always, either in a formal or informal ways. You can just ask them for a coffee breaks, for a lunch together. Maybe you can go even further if you have some common interests. You can play football together in the same group or go to the gym together. So these kind of things that could strengthen your relationships. And if that's not the case, if you just keep your relationship a formal relationship, then you need to take care of your communication and you need to keep attention to their behaviors. How is that? For example, if you start noticing that they are no longer answering the phone or they are no longer attending the meetings or always late in the meetings or not keeping attention to what's being said in the meetings, then you might think that this person is not interested as before or there is a problem somewhere. So what you need to do as a first step is to face your sponsor if you notice anything. If you notice that they are not engaged enough, you talk with them and discuss with them what's going wrong, what's happening. So that's very important. After building a relationship, just notice what level of engagement they have. And if you notice that they are no longer engaged with the project, you might go to the next step, which is a very hard step, which is pausing your project or putting your project on hold. So this is in a situation where your sponsor is no longer interested and they said to you that they are not very interested with the project or they have other plans or whatever. So if you ask the organization or the sponsor to put on hold the project, here there are two options. Either they will come back to commitment, and if they feel really that this project should continue, so their engagement will come back, or they will assign someone as a replacement for the sponsor if they are too busy or something, and in this case the project continues and the problem is solved. But on the other hand, if they are still not very interested in the project because of a certain reason, putting on hold the project might lead to stopping the project. That's all. It's a very tough decision, I know, especially if you have a team members, and team members will be disappointed because the project did not reach its objective. but it's better to save the money and time of the people now rather than just wasting a lot of time of project where the client is not looking for anymore. So that's the case when the sponsor don't want the project anymore, or they will move to other company and the company in which they are working on, they don't need the project. So it's time to stop the project now, better than dragging on and stop it later and having the same issue. How to motivate your team. Now you hired a talented team, and your challenge doesn't end here because you need to engage them in order to stick around with you and don't leave the company as soon as possible. So in order to engage your team, you need to set a vision and goals to motivate them. This is the first thing. Why you are doing this project and what's in for me. They will say if there is no challenges, there is no motivation. So if you are not challenging them for achieving the goal of the project, for achieving their objectives as persons, then there is no motivation. So you have to set the target for the project. You have to encourage them of achieving this target and reaching the vision of this project. For example, if you are building a house, try to encourage your team that this house will be pride for all the team members once it's finished because of its good design, because of the quality that you are looking to achieve. Whatever the reason is, try to focus on the outcome and on the vision and the goals. You can simply try to set KPIs. For example, we can set a goal of not having any fault products produced, 0 faults. This is a one KPI. For example, if we are in a 5% of faulty products, we should keep motivating the team by encouraging them to create products with just 1% faulty products, not 5. So putting KPIs, creating KPIs, and setting the vision are both techniques that could improve the motivation of team members. Next, you need to think about motivating your team members. You need to motivate them not just by setting the vision and the KPIs, but also by rewards. And rewarding them could be either tangible rewards by financial stuff and some materials, some equipments, whatever, travel, whatever kind of materialistic rewards, or could be just by recognizing their work, by saying thank you, by saying thanks for the heads up, by saying thanks for doing this good job. Encouraging them by saying good words is a very good technique that people like to be valued and thanked for their work. I remember once happened to me that someone left the office 2 hours after the 5 o'clock, and the manager did not say anything about that person had a deadline and they work overtime in order to reach the deadline. So that person was expecting to be thanked for their commitment in delivering the project on time, but the manager did not say anything as if this is what they have to do, what they supposed to do. So afterwards, that team member was demotivated and they even expressed their dissatisfaction from this manager's behavior. So as a project manager, you should thank your team for doing the good job. You should always thank them for doing good work so they continue doing the good work. Otherwise, they will not do any better. And if your team have already workload, that's fine. Otherwise, there is a problem that I see sometimes in some projects. Team members or collaborators don't have any workload. So they feel demotivated because of the lack of challenges or the lack of work. So if a talented person does not have anything to do, they will be demotivated. And even worse, if they have something to do, but it's not challenging, they will be demotivated as well. So if you have a talented team, do do your best that your team have a good work to do and a challenging work to do. Delegate them some of your complicated tasks to them. Don't worry about that. Try to trust them and they will excel. So giving them challenging work is a pillar for getting their engagement and their motivation. At the end, try to keep your doors open as a project manager. A project manager who closes the office doors on it is not a successful project manager. Keep your door open to all your team members and discuss with them. If you spare some time every day and discuss with your team members, you will discover a lot and you will learn a lot about them, and that will make them motivated to do the work because you are very close to them. The building a good environment within the project is on your responsibility as a project manager, and you have to excel on that. That's a very, very important as a project manager duty. How to convince your team to adapt the project management processes. In order to your project to succeed, it must follow a set of rules and practices. And sometimes it's not an easy job to convince your team that they should follow these kind of processes. So in order to convince them, it's a good practice that you showcase the benefits. You need not just tell them we need to do this and that, but you need to explain why we need to follow this kind of process. What's the drawbacks if we don't follow the process? For example, when we were using GitHub, I always tell my team that if they don't follow the process, which is assigning tasks to themselves when they start working on them, so we might end up having two people working on the same task. And this is a waste of time and energy. So if you explain to them what's the problems that might happen if we don't follow the process, most probably people will be convinced and will understand and try to follow the process. For example, in my previous job as well, we set a process to review the code 2 times by 2 people before we push them to production. So after a while, we measured how many issues we get and we compare it to the previous process of having only 1 person review the code. And we find out that if the code is reviewed by 2 people, it's much more better in terms of quality and in terms of issues happening than having only 1 person reviewing the code. So if you demonstrate through real values that following a process is a good thing, so most of your team will follow the process. Other thing is that you need to collaborate with your team in order to come up with the process. For example, if you involve your team in a lessons learned meeting and invite them to create the process and contribute in the elaboration of the process, taking their suggestions, etc. So most probably you're gonna follow the process that they contributed to because they feel attached to something that they created themselves and they will respect that process. In other cases, the processes are mandated, such as policies and standards. And in this case, you should show or demonstrate that failing in meeting those standards is a big issue or big problem. For example, if you are working in the construction project and you don't take the security measures, that's really a problem. You could be fined by the government, for example. So you need to explain to your team that those are not jokes. You need to fully be meeting these requirements and these standards. How to manage remote team members in different time zones. This is very complicated, especially if the team members are distributed throughout the planet, some in North America, others in East of Asia, others in Africa, others in Europe. You see that the time zone could be a real problem because the night here could be the morning there and vice versa. So in this case, flexibility is key. What you should do as a project manager is to give flexibility for team members to work on their own time zone and try your best to have at least few hours shared hours with the rest of the team. So In extreme cases, at least we need 1 hour, shared hour. If you are having a team in US and a team in India, most probably the end of the day in the US could be the morning in India and vice versa. So we need to have this 1 or 2 hour and take advantage of it in order to sync the both teams together. So flexibility is the rule number 1. And if there is meetings, they should be in these shared hours. Otherwise, try to rely on technology. Try to rely on offline messages. For example, if you'd like to provide feedback to your colleague, use Loom, for example. Record a video, share feedback, and share it. By that time that the team member get into work, they will see the message and they will understand it better than just typing a message. So verbal messages are much better than written messages. If you have any chance to use Loom and send messages via Loom, that's a very good choice. But I really recommend that. So using technology, trying to get profit from those shared hours, try to use chatting tools such as Slack or MS Teams or whatever kind of tools. Also, if you are going to have meetings, try to opt for video on meeting. If you are using Zoom or Google Meet, try to open the camera so you be attached to that person and build a personal bond with that colleague. That's very important because over time, if you are just meeting one person once a day or once or twice a week, if you don't see them, it's not going to be a real relationship. It just be formal relationship. So if you see them through the camera, discuss with them, that's most probably the relationship will be better, and you probably talk about other stuff as well. So don't have just a formal relationship. Try to develop the relationship and discuss about other stuff. So you build relationship, and that will be more efficient when dealing with remote teams. In order to figure out the best timing for a meeting, you can use a solution which is called Time Buddy, and that will help you figure out which is the best time for both of you in a different time zone. Also, it is very important that you set expectations right. If you are working with someone in India, you should define what is the exact deadline of this task. For example, this task or this newsletter should be ready by morning PST time zone or by evening Pacific Indian time. So you need to specify exactly when do you need your task to be done, and you should be clear in your communication. This way, people in the other side of the world will know exactly what your expectations are, and they will not be confused because you are in different time zones and communication is crippled a little bit because you are not co-located. So that's another way that you need to manage when talking with people overseas. And one thing that I would like to mention here, it's not always possible that you would co-locate, but if there is a possibility that you co-locate, that will be great. Some companies have an annual retreat, for example, or a biannual retreat in which every team member will meet with the other team members in the same region. For example, if they have office in India and office in US, so all the team members in India meet together in Delhi, for example, once a year, and all team members in US meet once a year in Seattle, for example. So that's possible. If they can meet all the team together in some part of the world, that would be great as well, but it's not always feasible due to the high budget of such arrangements. How to run effective meetings. Setting frequently unnecessary meetings could waste a lot of time. So as a project manager, you need to keep attention to this point. Unnecessary meetings should be avoided by any means. And to do that, you need to focus on what meetings should remain and what meetings should be get rid of. So in order to start a meeting, you should first ensure that it has a goal or it has an agenda. A meeting with agenda is much more effective than a meeting without agenda. So first you need to set up the agenda, what's going to be discussed in order for the meeting to be effective. Also involve the right people in the meeting. Sometimes I attended meetings with no decision makers, so it's a waste of time. If you are attending a meeting in which the right person is not there, it's a waste of time. So try to involve the right people in the right meeting. So first setting the agenda and having the right people in the meeting. And second, you need to set a time box to the meeting. If you don't have any time box, you can spend 1 hour for a meeting that only requires 5 minutes. So try to time box the meeting in order to just focus on what matters. Time boxing a meeting could be through the invite from the beginning. Just you mention to them that this meeting will be 15 minutes, for example, and try to just push the discussion to end at the right time. For example, when I attended meetings and I feel that people are taking their time and they are not focusing on the objective of the meeting, I usually ask them or urge them that I have something else to do after the meeting. So carry on and let's go to the point of the meeting. So this is one technique that you can use as a project manager or as a facilitator in a meeting to push all the parties to discuss what it matters in order to make the meeting effective. So that's the second part. But after all you want as a project manager is to spend your time on actual work. You don't like that your whole day or your team's whole day is spent on meetings. So you need to avoid the unnecessary meetings by setting a frame for updates or routine or regular meetings. For example, you can have two different kind of regular meetings. Once a daily call in which you sync with all the team members, and once a weekly call in which you define the objectives of the week, what's the different lessons learned, and what's the planning, what's the big picture of the planning for the week and stuff like that. So having a weekly meeting and a daily short meeting could save a lot of unnecessary meetings, or could be necessary, but they will be reduced if we have regular meetings. For example, I once worked for a company in which they do meetings every time. So if you start working on something, someone's just jump in and call you. And after you end this call, someone else asks something through a call instead of writing on Slack. So that interruptions makes you unfocused and makes your team unfocused, and you cannot do anything because of the continuous meetings. And to resolve this, if we have a regular daily meeting, so people might wait or could wait to that meeting and discuss this stuff during that meeting instead of interrupting you so many times during the day. So that's a good technique. And if you think about it from an Agile perspective, most probably you know a little bit about Scrum approach or the Agile approach, and they have something similar which is called stand-up meeting. So stand-up meeting is a time-boxed meeting of 15 minutes maximum, and during that meeting there is a discussion about what has been done yesterday and what will be done today, and if there is any blockers. So this kind of stand-up is regular meeting that reduce a lot of other meetings throughout the day, and this could lead more focused team members and more effective meetings if there is any other meetings during the day. How to effectively delegate. Actually, delegation happens up and down. So delegation is not just giving tasks to your subordinates, but also involves giving tasks to your superiors. If you don't have the authority to work on something or to take a decision on something, you just have to go to your upper management, to your boss, to your sponsor, and ask them to take responsibility of this kind of tasks. So this is the first part that you should keep in mind. You are not allowed to take decision or work beyond your authority as a project manager. So on the second half, if you are managing too many tasks, try to delegate as much as possible. And this comes the fact that you need to figure out which tasks you should delegate. Not all tasks could be delegated. Some tasks should not be delegated, such as reviewing performance of your team, for example. You can delegate collecting informations, but you should personally doing the review with the team members. You cannot delegate reviewing performance to someone else. So what you should delegate is tasks that are tedious, manual, such as data entry, tasks that you are not very good at, such as design or coding, things that you don't really have deep knowledge, you should delegate. So this is very important that you classify the tasks that you can delegate and those that you can't. And once you delegate, you should support the team member who is going to take that task. Delegation does not involve just throwing tasks on them and let them figure it out. You need to support them to check in if they have any issue, if they have all the resources needed, what's happened if they lack information, to whom they should talk to, and all this kind of clarifications should be discussed with that team member in order to succeed in their work. So giving them those tasks, giving them those directions also involves giving them the authority. It's not a good idea that you delegate them, then you blame them for doing this and that. So it's fine that they do something wrong. You should expect that. Most probably they do something wrong at the beginning, then they will learn and they will get back to you and you correct them and so on. It's very important that you support the team member who is going to take the task until they learn about that task and how to do it appropriately this time and next time. It's also very important that you compliment and you reward this person if they did something good. If you don't, that person will be disengaged and will not feel the sense of achievement. Don't reward yourself or tell people that you did that work yourself. If someone did the work for you, you should reward them. You should consider their effort. You should mention in your report or status report or feedback to the whole team that I get support and help from that people and that person, and you should thank them for all their effort and compliment their efforts. That's very important. Thanking people is a leadership character that you need always to embrace. How to deal with a team member who keeps missing deadlines. This is a very frustrating situation. I know most of the project managers are suffering from such behavior of few team members who keeps missing deadlines. So how to deal with this issue? When facing that issue, probably the problem is not always the team member who is missing deadlines. The problem in the first place is a communication problem. Let me explain. You ask the team member to complete a task as soon as possible, right? So the team member do their best and work on the task and maybe delivers it after 3 days. And you are frustrated because 3 days is too much, but who knows? He does not know that 3 days is too much because you told them as soon as possible and you did not define them when this soon is good and when this soon is bad. Maybe 3 days is okay for him, but not okay for you. So you need to define what's the deadline. What's the deadline for the task? It should be by this day or by the next week or by the next month. You should be clear and concise in your communication. This is number one. Number two, sometimes the tasks are not realistic in terms of estimations. It's so important that the team member comes with the estimations when they start working on something. This is a communication issue again, because if you tell someone that this task should be done in 1 day, but actually they start working it and achieve it 10% by midday, most probably it requires maybe 2-3 days and they will not complete it by the end of the day. So at this time, they should get back to you and tell you, hey, you know what, I just achieved 10% of this task and by no means it could complete it by the end of the day. So informing you early on is very a good habit. in order to receive such an information, you should keep communication open with that person by telling them, hey, if you think that the deadline is unrealistic, please let me know. And hey, if you encounter any problem achieving this issue, please let me know. And something like that. Keeping the communication open is a way that you show that your interest in completing the task as early as possible is high. And this comes the second part, why the task should be completed on time. And here you need to explain the implications and the impact of not finishing the task on time. For example, if you finish it later, then I could not provide feedback because the brochure will be printed, for example. Or if you deliver this data by the end of the day, then the accountant will work on the invoice and we get paid tomorrow. But if you provide this data tomorrow, we will be paid the next week. So you explain the impact of getting delays, and this way you encourage the team member to do better effort to deliver on time. So to resume, you need involve the team member in the estimations and keep communication open and try to explain the implications or the impact. If you do all this and the team member is still missing deadline, then there is something wrong. Either the team member is not interested in the job, or the team member is not interested in the company or the project at whole. So you need to sit and talk with that team member. What's going on? Are they working with another company at the same time and they don't tell you? Are they working as a freelancer? So what's going wrong? So as a project manager, you should discuss openly and directly with the team member and letting them know that if this kind of behavior continues, we need to figure out what's the solution. We need to come up with a roadmap that helps them being more committed to the deadlines and so on. So that's all the tips I can provide about dealing with people who miss deadlines. How to handle staff turnover. First, not all turnover is bad. Some turnover is good if the team member is not a good fit with the company and with the project. So in that case, the turnover is fine. But in the other case, if you really need that team member and the team member is competent and you lose them, that's a big loss and you need to encounter such situations. And in this case, you need to figure out why this person left the company or left the project, and you need to discuss with this person before they leave. Talk to them, have an exit interview, and try to discuss with them why they left, why they take such a decision, because the decision of joining a company and leaving a company, it is not a light decision. Someone thinks deeply before taking such a decision because it is very impactful in their life. So you need to figure out why that person leaves and what your company could do or what you can do in your project in order to maintain that person. So that's the first part. And the second part, if you are going to hire someone else, invest too much time on hiring the correct person and the good fit for your company, your organization, and your project. You have to select the set of questions that are appropriate to your company, to your culture, and try to discuss with the person who is going to join the project and see if they will likely stay for a long time or they are likely to move to other company very sooner. So this is the second part. Try to discuss first with leavers and try to understand the motivation for the newcomers. And for those who are still in your organization or projects, try to provide very good environment to all of them. So you maintain them as much as possible by providing a good environment. It could be a good salary, a good working environment, a good relationship with all team members, not a very distressed environment in which people are not feeling comfortable. And you need also to promote them personally and professionally, like giving them training, giving them time off to have a good time with their families, and all this kind of stuff. It's very important that you act as a people first project manager. You should keep attention to the feelings of your team and try to act as an emotionally intelligent person. How to deal with out of scope requirements. Out of scope is when the client asks for something which was not initially previewed to be within the project scope. In this case, you are in trouble because the client is requesting something that will take time and take energy of your team without being counted initially and included in the project budget and schedule. So you can conclude here that out of scope happens for predictive projects and not for agile projects. For agile projects, there is iterations, and if there is a new request at the end of the iteration, just we prioritize this new request and we add it to the next iteration, and that's it. So as a basic rule in the agile approach, we are welcoming the change because we have the ability to include them in the next few iterations. But in the case of predictive projects, it's really a problem because all the planning is already set and the baseline was established for the project, and any changes that comes down the road during the execution phase are considered as problems and considered as change requests. So when this happens, you should be clear about that. If a client comes to you asking for something that you did not count in your planning or in your statement of work, you should tell them clearly that this is out of scope and this have an impact on the project schedule and the project budget. So the first thing is to be clear about that, to be transparent about that. You can just share the statement of work or the project plan with your client or the relevant stakeholder who asked for the change and demonstrate to them that this request is out of scope. But sometimes this not sufficient because sometimes this requirement is kind of hidden. They meant something, but you understand something else. In this case, you try to negotiate with the client in order to reach out a solution that satisfies both of you. But as a general rule, if something happens beyond your power as a project manager, you can tell the client that you should bring this up to the management and you can ask the change control board for approval. For example, when I worked as a project manager in telecommunication industry, the client sometimes asked for something out of scope. In this case, I will tell them I can do that, but I need to consult with my upper management or my line manager in order to confirm whether this could be considered as a change request or not. So this way they know that there is an administrative procedures that they have to follow, and you have to explain this administrative procedures in the beginning so they be clear about what they should do in case of new requirements. Now, if the requirement is approved, you need to ask them for all the details needed to succeed that change request. You need to ask them what happens if we don't implement this change request. What's the scope of this change request? What's the timeline of the change request? By what time you want this change request to be implemented? And you ask it for any detail that you find relevant in order to successfully implement the change request. That's very important because once you are going to implement the change request, it could have an impact on other existing features, and you might not encounter an easy change or easy implementation as you thought it will be. So take into consideration all the consequences and all the impact for that change request. Take into consideration if you are implementing a change request just for free without adding schedule or budget to your client, you should mention that. You should get credit for that extra effort. But don't do that all the time, and don't do that without the approval of the line manager and the change committee. So that's how you can limit the number of change requests and how you can manage and deal with change requests when it happens. How to handle a team member's bad attitude or behavior. A team member with a bad attitude or behavior could be destructive to a project team and cohesiveness of the project team. That's why you need to figure out this solution as soon as possible before it disseminates to all team members. First, you need to keep communication open because most probably people with inappropriate behavior will not show their behavior in front of you. So maybe someone else will bring that to you as a project manager and tell you that there is something wrong going on with that person. So in order to correct this kind of behavior, you need to discuss with that team member and try to keep an open communication and try to explain to them that this behavior is not acceptable in the project or in the organization. Assessing the behavior is very important. You can assess the behavior through 3 steps. You explain the situation and you explain what is the behavior and then demonstrate the impact. For example, if someone is disclosing secret information or confidential information, you can tell them that during the meetings or during the networking with other people, this is the situation. You are disclosing secret informations or confidential informations. This is the bad behavior. And if you continue doing that, people will not trust you and you will put the company in a very bad situation because you are delivering information that should not be available to public. So you are explaining the impact. You know that if you do this, and you explain to this, normally that person should understand that this behavior is not tolerated anymore and they should correct themselves. But this does not happen right away. Because those kind of behaviors are normally used to happen frequently and the changing those behaviors does not happen overnight. So what you should do as a project manager, you should call out this behavior whatever it happens. So for example, if you are in the next meeting and this person talks about confidential information, you can stop them by saying, hey, come on, you are talking about something that is supposed to be confidential. And you can remind them over and over so they can get rid of this behavior. Over time, you will notice that if this person is going to correct themselves or not. At the end of the day, if this person continues doing that inappropriate behavior, then you need to let them go. Because, maybe he or she is not a good fit with your company culture or with your project, and your team member, they may not be comfortable working with them. So the appropriate choice in this case, if all other options are not giving any fruitful results, then letting this person go is maybe the best option. That should be the ultimate option. You should try first to guide and correct that person first, and letting them go is the last option. How to recover a troubled project. The project is considered troubled or distressed is when the baseline and what it is being implemented, the difference is very huge. In this case, we said that this project is off track and we need to rescue it. So the first thing is to assess what's going on. What's the root cause of being in trouble and reaching to this situation? So maybe the reason is the market. Maybe the reason is external to the project because of the different inflation of price materials, for example. Maybe the reason is internal, maybe because of the unsupportive management or the management issues, and maybe the problem is within the project itself, such as incompetent team member or non-defined requirements and specifications or unsupportive stakeholders. So all this kind of stuff could be the reason for a project being off track. So the first thing is that you define what's the root cause of the distressed project. And once you find this out, you need to come up with a rescue plan. This plan should mention what should be done instead, what should be done in the future. For example, if the budget is no longer relative, we need to come up with a new budget that is realistic. And with the new budget, we can achieve the project outcomes. Likewise, if the schedule is no longer realistic, we should come with a more realistic schedule, and so on. So a rescue plan should be like a new plan, a new baseline for the project in order to achieve the project outcome. And once that project rescue plan is established, you need to follow that plan and implement it appropriately. It's problematic if you already create a rescue plan and you struggle implementing it as well. So what you should do is that you have to track progress step by step, day by day, week by week. So every time you implement something, every time you do the progress of the implementation of the rescue plan, you measure progress on tasks, you measure some KPIs, you need to have a frequent communication with team members, focus groups, etc. So you can gather as much information as you can and analyze them to see if the project is back to track or not. Once everything is established and the project is on track, and once you finish all the project, don't forget to have a lessons learned meeting. Of course, since the project got in a trouble, so you need to figure out how we could act in the future in order to avoid such situation in the future. So you need to gather all the lessons learned, document them, and include them and review them in future projects so we don't have such situation in the future. How to efficiently frame and meet your client expectations. First, you need to be transparent about the amount of time and budget that your tasks are requiring. Don't overpromise. If the requirement takes a lot of time to be implemented, be bold and say it. Say that this requirement requires a lot of time. This requirement requires a lot of expertise, it requires a lot of resources. So be transparent. The first thing is that you be transparent about how much time, energy, resources, etc. these requirements might require. And once you are transparent about all these, then you could negotiate your sponsor or client about whether to leave or put these requirements in the scope of the project. And if this requirement entails some risks, you need to mention that. You need to mention that in case of having inflation prices or having some difficulties implementing these features, that our initial estimations could be not accurate and we could have a cost overrun. So try to be fully transparent about your expectations, your fears, your suspicions, and don't overpromise. Many times, especially the sales team, overpromise. Everything could be done at a very cheap price. And afterwards, the project manager faces big problems. So the first thing is that you should not overpromise. And once you gather all the requirements, you should document them very well. Define what's in scope, what's out of scope. Collaborate with your stakeholders and your sponsor about each requirement and what it needs. The last thing that I always emphasize is that you need to keep communication open. If you face any difficulties right away, try to notify your sponsor about this. Because if you keep silent, if you are struggling behind the scene and the customer does not see that, afterwards you will be blamed for not communicating these issues. So if you are facing a cost overrun or if you are discovering that these initial estimations are not appropriate, then you should first communicate with your sponsor. And when you communicate things early, then you can resolve it much more straightforward and easy resolution. Then after some time, things will be accumulated and you will find big difficulty resolving issues later on. How to accurately estimate project cost and duration. Accurate estimation is one of the most difficult tasks that you will encounter as a project manager because estimation is by default not very precise, and that's why you are going to be in a contradictory situation, trying to give as much accurate estimation as possible, but at the end of the day, that estimation remains an estimation and could not be accurate. So in order to resolve this, you need first to collect the maximum information that could help you come up with a better estimation. If there is a requirement, you need to find out all the details about these requirements, the technical details, what involves that requirement, what's the impact of the requirement, how to implement it, etc. So if there is a new project, you should try to understand what's the goal of the project, how we consider this project is successful or not, and what the KPI that you should be reached, what the definition of them, what's all these kind of KPIs or parameters will help you define an estimation. This is from a project perspective, but also your experience counts. If you have previous experience in the field and if you have a knowledgeable team members already in place, so that will help you come up with a better estimation as well. So all these matters. And after, if you got all of this at the end of the day, the initial initial estimation is going to be based on similar previous projects. And this is what it is called analogous estimation. The analogous estimation is nothing than comparing the current project with a previous similar project. And if you start elaborating the planning and you start decomposing the different tasks and activities of your project, then you can come up with a better estimation based on WBS, work breakdown structure. And this comes not just from the work breakdown structure, but the work breakdown structure will help you understand how many people will work on the project, the resources, how much either human or material equipment, etc. that are needed in your project. Also, when you come up with a quality plan, with a risk plan, with a procurement plan, with all the plans that you are doing during the planning phase, all this could help you define the accurate estimation for your project. In addition to using the bottom-up estimation, using the WBS, there are other techniques as well. You can get the opinion of subject matter experts. They can help you to come up with an accurate estimations based on their experience as well. You can also define estimations based on parametric estimation technique, which is if you are, for example, paving a road, 1 kilometer takes 5 days, then you can do the calculation and paving 10 kilometers requires 50 days. So doing this kind of calculations also help, and they will help you define a more accurate estimation. But even after coming up with a better estimation, the estimation is not a fixed value. Over time, if you are in the phase of executing the project, you need to follow and track the progress and actualize the value or the estimation. So if you are in progress of your project, try to do a variance analysis, like schedule variance analysis and cost variance. And this way you will keep track of whether you are behind schedule, ahead of schedule, or over budget or ahead of budget. All these matters. And if you are discovered that you are behind or ahead of a schedule, then you should communicate with your stakeholder. As I always says, communication is key. And try to fasten your way of doing things or adjusting your planning and do whatever corrective actions that you should take in order to bring the project on track. How to operate a small project. Do you know that a small project also requires some effort, documentation, and processes? We all know that big project involves a lot of multidisciplinary people and a lot of processes and a lot of documentation. But even small projects with one collaborator or 2, 3, 4, 5 collaborators is still a small project and is still requiring some project management. So let's see together what project management small project requires. First of all is that you define the goal, the success criteria, and some basic information that you should write down. You can write down this information in just a spreadsheet or a document. It does not require to be a big document of dozens of pages. Maybe even 1 page is sufficient. You need to write down the title of this project, when it will be finished, how much budget or resources it includes, what are the stakeholders, what are the main KPIs, how we consider this project is a success or a failure. So all this kind of basic information, it's preferably that you write them down and you put them aside so you can just measure your progress and measure your stages against these basics. Afterwards, you should manage the tasks of your project appropriately. It does not maybe require a heavy software to manage this or any complicated communication channels. So if you have, for example, one collaborator apart from you as a project manager, you can just use Trello board, for example, just having a column for to-do list, a column for doing list, and a column for done list. So this way you know what are the tasks and you know what are their status, and you can manage the tasks easily. In addition to that, if the requirements are not very clear, then you can opt for an agile approach. You define some sprints of 1 to 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and throughout these sprints, you measure the progress and you measure what was achieved and what to achieve in the next sprints, etc. So even in small projects, communication matters, because you know that if you are going to delegate some tasks to your collaborator, you need to define what should be done, define what are the success criteria, and having regular status meetings over time, such as once a week or twice a week or every day, depends on how much work is on your project. So to resume, you need to have a basic documentation. You need to manage your tasks in a very easy way, whether using Trello or spreadsheets. And finally, you need to keep communication open with your collaborators. So these are the basic things. And once you finish those, don't forget the retrospective and the lessons learned meeting. Even small projects should be closed. So you should close the small projects appropriately by having lessons learned meeting. Try to learn what went well, what did not went well, and what should be done in the future. So in order to correct yourself as a project manager, if you encounter such small projects in the future as well. When and how to hire a freelancer. This is actually a big topic, and maybe a single course could be made for this topic alone. But let's be short here and define when and how exactly you can hire a freelancer. First of all, the hiring a freelancer depending on your organizational culture and your project complexity, pace, domain, etc. For example, if you are working on a very confidential project related to the government, for example, or to the security, maybe you should not hire a freelancer because you may disclose some confidential information to someone which is outside the organization, and that might cause a problem. On the other hand, if your organization is a growing company and they really need resources urgently, they might require you to hire a freelancer because they do not have time to wait until hiring someone full-time, and that will take weeks and months. On the other hand, if you hire a freelancer, it could just take hours or 1 or 2 days maximum. So the matter is, hiring freelancer is an option that you can opt for in so many cases. One of the most obvious cases as well is that you need an expertise that you don't have in your current team. So you can find easily someone expert in one field, you get them as a freelancer, work for several days or weeks, and then once the mission is accomplished, you say bye-bye to that freelancer and the work is done and everyone is happy. So we are talking about these cases, and once you are accomplished to hire a freelancer, you need to follow some processes and define the mission and the description of that freelancing job. That's very important because sometimes outsourcing a freelancer could fail because of not defining concisely what the freelancer should do, or the freelancer don't get the sufficient support from you to succeed in their tasks. So the first step is that you define what's the mission of the freelancer, what they are supposed to do, what the job description, what they need, with whom they should communicate, what the time frame, what's the pay for the mission, etc. So all these details should be laid off and explained in a very detailed way. After doing this, you will have to find a medium in order to share or find a freelancer. There is 3 ways that you can find freelancers. The first way is looking for freelancers in social media. For example, you can search for Facebook groups, and for this, you have 2 options. Either you search by domains. For example, if you are looking for 3D designer, you look for 3D designers freelancers, and you look for specialized group in this area or expertise. The other option is that you look by area. For example, freelancers in India, freelancers in Pakistan, freelancers in Romania. So you look by area and you are supposed to find freelancers in those areas. So these are the 2 different options, and using social media is a very efficient way for finding good and talented freelancers. I already experienced that, and I found very good freelancers using Facebook. The second option is that you go and look for job portals such as Glassdoor or FlexJobs and these platforms, and you can pay a little amount of money, and on the other hand, you will get a lot of resumes. The good thing is that you will find a very experienced people applying in these platforms, and you will find a very diverse profiles. Probably number says that jobs in these platforms receive in average 250 applications for the single job. So there is a good chance that you find a good freelancer, but you have to pay too much for a good expert. The third way is that using is the most common, and it involves using a freelancing platform such as Upwork, Freelancer, Guru. There is so many platforms specialized in freelancing. And for those platforms, you put your description of your freelancing mission and people will apply from the different parts of the world. Once you get their apply, you can check their resume, their response, and opt for discussing with one or two freelancers and try to give them a trial task. Usually this technique I use with the freelancers at the beginning. I do not engage with them until trying some small tasks. So you can try a freelancer using a trial task of 1 hour or 2 hours just to see if they are good in communication or if they are skillful or not. You can also opt for a paid task, which is considered as a trial task as well. But at the end of the day, what matters is that you should try the freelancer because engaging in a longer task or longer term commitment. Once you do this, you have two options as well in terms of payment, whether to pay the freelancer by hour or you pay them by accomplishing the whole project, a lump sum amount, which you pay at the end of the project or based on milestones. So the options here depends on the complexity of the project and how long is the project you are giving to the freelancer. If the tasks are very clear and you know the outputs, then maybe having a fixed budget is a good option. But if you are not sure about the requirements and the freelancer may do other tasks and might do some research, etc., then you should opt for hourly contracts. Once you agreed about all this stuff with the freelancer, you start in and work with the freelancer on the project. But you should communicate very well with the freelancer. You should keep the communication open. Ask them about their progress, if they have any blockers. You can use some software. For example, using Upwork, there is a software that you can use to check how many hours they spent, and there is random screenshots. And you can use other software as well, such as Monitask, in order to get this kind of tracking of what the freelancer is doing. So all these are tips for hiring a freelancer. As I said, this topic is very huge, but these are the basics for when and how to hire a freelancer. How to document your project. First of all, documenting the project depends whether you are using a predictive approach or an agile approach. Agile approach opts for a minimum documentation because there is a great potential that requirements change and there is no way that we document all upfront in a very detailed way. So on the other hand, if you are working in a predictive environment, you have to document everything in a very detailed way. So you don't have to get into trouble afterwards about getting change requests and problems arises over time, whether these changes are within the scope or outside the scope. So the second thing that I should note here is that documentation does not mean you have to open a Word document or a Google Doc document. A documentation could happen inside a software, could happen inside an application. For example, if you are using Agile approach, then your documentation will be inside Jira, for example, or inside Bitbucket or Azure software or Trello software. So all these tools could include documentation. So don't you think about documentation as a document in Word or in Google Docs. So documentation could take any form, and this is the second note. Now let's talk a little bit about the minimum documentation that a project requires either for predictive or for agile. First things first, the project should have a business case. Why this project should take place at all? The business case document will answer this question and will develop the idea of the project and what's the purpose of doing this project. After doing the business case document, and the sponsor will be convinced about going through this investment, in order to initiate a project, you need a project charter. A project charter is a document that has the basics information to authorize the project or manager working on the project. The basics are the mission of the project, the success criteria, the budget, the schedule, who are the decision makers, and stuff like that. So these are the basics, and this could be in a spreadsheet, could be in a one-page document, whatever format it has. Afterwards, if you are going to use the predictive, you are going to plan ahead the project. And in this case, you are going to develop a lot of planning documents such as the quality management plan, risk management plan, project schedule, project requirements, statement of work, the scope document, and all this kind of documentation required for executing the work afterwards. If you are working in an Agile project, you just put all the requirements in the product backlog. So afterwards, if you are executing the project, you might need to monitor the progress of the project and monitor any things happens during the project. For example, if issues take place, you should record that in the issue log. If a change request comes down the road, you should record that in a change log, and etc. So keeping track of all these documents and all these things that happen during the execution is one of the responsibilities of the project manager and his team. And after finishing the project, you need to close the project in a formal way by having a lessons learned meeting, recording all this kind of information that you encountered during the project, and you should keep attention to them to improve in the future. So at the end, I should say that there is two important things that you should keep an eye on. The first thing that you should keep an eye on is that not every document should be accessed by any team member. So there are some documents that should be confidential, such as the contracts with some providers, for example. They should be secret, the salaries for some people on the project, and stuff like that. So ensure that you are using solution that prevents people from accessing documents that they are not allowed to access. You can use SharePoint, for example, or any other software. The second point is that you need to archive and organize your documents very well, because in the future, you will access them. You will get them as a support for doing future projects. So it's much more easier if you duplicate a document in your next project, and you will find that you get rid of the heavy work that you will have to do, because you already done that in the past. So organizing your folders and your files in a good way so that you can access them easily in the future is the best practice. You need a project management software? Maybe the answer is obvious. People will say yes. Nowadays, a lot of people use the project management software in order to execute and monitor their projects. But in some cases, you might not need a project management software. So we'll see together when you don't need software. You need a software in most cases if you start to forget things. You start to miss deadlines, you start to forget some tasks, you start to forget some files where they are, etc. And here it comes the requirement to get a software in order to organize life for you. When we talk about project management software, that could be Trello, that could be Jira, that could be Monday, that could be ClickUp, that could be any kind of software that you can use as a project manager to just organize your tasks. There are other software that are specialized in planning, such as Microsoft Project or Primavera and many others. So as a project manager, if you are dealing with projects that requires such a tool in order to achieve the planning or in order to organize work, then you should opt and learn how to work with these softwares. I personally used a lot of software of project management during my career and find them very helpful. Especially software now are very customizable and you can adjust them to your needs. For example, the Kanban board, you can adjust it, you can adjust the columns, whether you are using for software industry or for any kind of projects. You can use these Kanban boards. So we use a software in so many cases, and nowadays they are considered as a must. But in some cases, if the project is very small, for example, you are having an idea and you hired a freelancer and you're just managing them. So maybe you don't need a software in this case. My dad, for example, managed a project of a construction project and he did not use any software. He write everything down on a piece of paper and he have a glossary or folder of a lot of papers with all the details of the project. And actually it works and he succeeded in building the house and delivering a good result. But maybe this works now, but in the future, if he would like to check the previous data or to compile the data in order to make some analysis, it will not be easy with the information that he has right now. So that's why if you are managing a project now using traditional way of management, it might work, but in order to leverage the information you have, a software could be a good solution for you. How to track and measure project progress. This depends on whether you are running a predictive project or an agile project. If you run an agile project, then you are going to measure the progress on each sprint and on the whole release. To measure the progress on the whole release, you define the group of features that you are going to implement in that release, and you will create a feature burn up chart or a feature burn down chart, which measures how many features you implemented over how many features remains in that release. Same applies to sprints, since you are going to measure the progress on each sprint using the burn down and burn up charts. These burn up and burn down charts will measure how many story points are consumed over how many story points are remaining, and you will know either you are on track or off track of your target or sprint goal. So this is actually the main measures you are going to employ in agile context. But in a predictive or waterfall projects, we have different kind of measures. So mostly in a predictive projects, you are going to set milestones. And for each milestone, you have a set amount of tasks or features that you have to accomplish in order to move to the next milestone. And throughout the milestones or throughout the project, you are going to take some measurements. You are going to measure how much work you have done and the value of that work. And that is known as the earned value. You are going to use the earned value in order to find out either you are behind schedule or ahead of schedule, or either you are on budget, above budget, or under budget. So basically you are going to find out the actual cost through your expenditures, either on your bank account or invoices or whatever expenditures you have made. And you are going to find out the planned value, which is how much work is supposed to be done at this period of time. So using these parameters, you are going to measure the schedule variance or schedule performance index, or the cost variance or the cost performance index. So these are the two ways you usually use to keep projects on track. It's very important that you collect data all the time. You collect data, you analyze data, and you keep communicating with collaborators in order to find whether you are on track or you are off track. What are the main project management KPIs? This really depends with your project, what kind of project you are running. KPIs differs with industries. If you are taking an industrial project, your KPIs will be surely different from running an IT project. If you are running a project in the medicine field, your KPIs are different than running a cybersecurity project, for instance. So depending on the industry, you will find different KPIs. But keep in mind that any KPI that you are going to opt for should be SMART: specific, measurable, accountable, realistic, and finally time-bound. There is other interpretations for the SMART goals, but the essence of the SMART is that you could measure those metrics and you could get advantage from using those metrics. KPIs also differ with kind of projects and what approaches you are following. If you are following Agile approach, you will have different metrics than predictive approach. For example, for Agile approach, they used to have the velocity as an important metric. And velocity is the amount of story points that are consumed during a sprint. So this measure is used to assess the performance of a team, assess the health of the team, and it's also used for planning. So for instance, if your team's velocity is 50, for example, and you are going to plan for the next sprint, so most probably you are going to plan 50 or 52 or 53 or 48, something between 50, in order to be aligned with the capacity of your team. So this is about Agile. But when it comes to predictive approach, we don't use velocity, but we use other metrics such as the schedule performance index and the cost performance index, or the cost variance and schedule variance, in order to measure whether we are on track or off track. This is in terms of schedule and cost and planning. But when it comes to other aspects of the project, we can find other metrics, such as how many change requests took place. The more the change request the situation is, because it indicates that you missed a lot of the requirements from the beginning. And another measure that you can take is how many issues you discovered during the project. So the more issues you discover during the project, the bad news you have. If you have too many issues during the project, that indicates that you need to work more on the quality side of the project. So there is other measures related to how many collaborators left the project, the turnover rate, and you can take so many measurements in different aspects of your project depending on your goal and depending on your duration of the project and complexity. So to keep it short, there is limitless number of KPIs. But what matters most is that when you track a KPI, you should know exactly that this KPI is relevant to you, and having this KPI increased or decreased has a consequence. And that indicates that you should invest time in collecting data and analyzing this KPI, because otherwise you will waste time for nothing. You will waste collecting data and tracking a KPI that does not have any added value or very little added value. How to measure your team's motivation. A motivated team could lead your project to success. But how do you know that your team is motivated? Actually, you can do that by two things. First is having a behavioral assessment or study. And second is having a satisfaction survey or analysis. So the first thing is that you need to understand either the behavior of the team member is being changed to the worst or to the best. So this is by observation. You are going to observe the behavior of your colleague or team member. And if you notice that this team member never comes on time or is going to miss deadlines, or he or she is not taking care of details and not engaging too much in communication, that's an indication their behavior is indicating a low commitment to the project and a low motivation. So if you observed this kind of behaviors, you need to discuss with that team member and try to understand what's behind that behavior. It could be related to personal issues. It could not be related to the project. And that thing you should understand or you should know as a project manager. The second thing is the satisfactory assessment. And you will need to do an assessment of whether the team member is satisfying with what they are getting as a salary, with what they are getting as a training. What's the environment in your project? Is it distressed environment or is it good promoting environment? So all this kind of stuff that you need to talk with your team member in order to understand whether they are satisfying with what they are getting or not. Sometimes team members don't show that they are dissatisfied, or at least they don't show it to you as a project manager. So in this case, you need to opt for anonymous surveys. You sometimes send anonymously some surveys and try to gather data so you can understand if your team members are happy or not, if they are satisfied or not. So you can do this, or you can rely from people external to the project. For example, you can discuss with stakeholders and get feedback from them whether they are having a good relationship with project team members, is everything is okay. You can ask anyone involved in the project to get an idea about the environment and the satisfaction of the whole project team. So to resume, we have two things that you should work on as a project manager to promote and increase motivation of your team: the behavioral assessment and the satisfactory assessment, and you should get both right. How could you deliver a project without bugs or issues? This might sound strange because, in every project, there is bugs, there is problems, there is issues that we should deal with. So what's the solution for this? Actually, your role as a project manager is to minimize these kind of issues. Some projects do not tolerate any issue, so you must do extra effort to eliminate all issues and bugs, etc. Some issues tolerate some amount or some number of bugs, but you need to define the edge. And defining this edge will push you to set a plan for quality. And this is the key, actually. In order to reduce the number of issues and number of bugs in your project, you should work on the quality. That's it, in 2 words. Working on the quality. Beforehand, you need to set a strategy, a plan for the quality. For example, you can set a list of tests you have to perform in your project. You have to define how many people they will work as a quality engineers in the project, what's their role, how you validate the product, how you validate the deliverables, what layers of security you are going to implement, what layers of testing, All these kind of verifications will reduce considerably the amount of errors and bugs. So you have the choice. Either you invest too much time, too much effort on quality and reduce it to a minimum number, or you just invest a little bit and you probably will have a very high amount of issues and bugs. So it's up to you and up to your client. If you decide that you reduce risks, you should invest more money on quality. That's the short answer. Now imagine that you already planned for the quality, you set a quality management plan, and you started executing the project. Even with that, bugs and issues could happen, right? So in this case, you have to follow some processes in order to take care of these issues in a right manner. So the best practice is to create issue log in which you record any issue you encounter and you assign someone responsible for that issue. That person will track the correction of the issue until implementing it and fixing it correctly. That person will take care of that issue until it closes. So the maintenance of an issue log is mandatory in order to manage and control issues in a very effective way. We can have a software or a tool managing the issues logs, such as GitHub is a tool that permits to register any issue encounter, assign it to a developer, and they will work on it. If you are working on any industrial project, you can have ticketing software in which you insert any issue you encounter in the project and you take care of it. Just be careful as a project manager. Don't assign an issue to two persons because everyone else will wait for the other and expect that the other will be responsible for. If you assign one then more person to deal with an issue, try to make someone accountable. Only one person accountable. So at least you guarantee that someone is accountable and someone will take care of fixing the issue. How to wrap up a project or how to close a project. Even a small project needs to be closed. Every project needs to be closed appropriately so you don't encounter any problems in the future. I know a project in which it is closed for years and afterwards phone and electricity bills come in after a few years and the project manager was surprised because they are thinking that the bill was closed by the end of the project, but in reality they did not, and the counter of fees continues until a few years later. So be careful. If you are going to close a project, close all the contracts. Don't forget anyone, because maybe after a few years you will find that there are open contracts or unpaid invoices and you will be in trouble, even you as a project manager or your organization. So be careful. If you are a project manager, try to close all contracts and try to follow all formalities. You don't know. After a few years, maybe an audit will take place and they will see that there is some flaws in your accounting or in your formalities of the project and you might find a problem. So at the end of the project, ensure that you follow all the procedures of closing, all the formalities, all the standards. That's very, very important. Then if all these kind of formalities are done and you are good, then you can move to have a retrospective meeting or lessons learned meeting with all the team members and try to gather any kind of feedback that could help you as a project manager or could help the organization in the future and could help the team as well. So gathering these lessons learned, documenting them, getting all the conclusions accessible is very important as the final task. But this does not end here. You need to organize and archive all the files you worked with on your project. You need to communicate with all the stakeholders that your project is closed. If there is any feedback, you solicit feedback from the stakeholders as well, and the sponsor, the client, etc. And finally, you create a ceremony as a recognition for the people who worked with you and for the achievement of the project. So the ceremonies is a kind of reward and recognition for the effort done during the project. So don't miss this ceremony for the end of the project. Try to reserve at least 1 hour or 2 hours of celebration. It could be an opportunity for networking and exchange with people that you don't interact with too much during the project. So that's an important thing that you could think of as well. And at the end, you can also update your resume and add the project to your CV as you are a project manager, you will upgrade over time and you will showcase that you have managed so many projects in the past. So since the information are still fresh in your mind, you can go and update your resume. So all these are some advices for you as a project manager and some tips on how to close your project in an appropriate way. What's the difference between Agile and Scrum? A lot of people get confused between these two terms and think that they are pretty much similar or they are completely different, and they don't really know what's the difference, the real difference between the two. So in this short video, I'm going to explain it further and in a clear and simple way. So let's start with Agile. Agile is philosophy established after practicing the waterfall or the predictive approach for many years. So for many years, project managers, in order to implement any kind of project, they start planning out everything and then execute those what is planned, and finally they close the project and that's it. So once the technology evolves and the software industry emerged, the predictive approach is very crippling because the pace of change is very high, and if you plan something for a long time and you start to implementing it, you will find out things are already changed, and also the customer at the beginning don't know what they need for, and so on. So there is a very high probability for a change, and any change request is costly, and so on. After a while, especially in the IT and software industry, they realize that they cannot cope with the predictive approach anymore, and they have to come to something new. So this opens the door for emerging the Agile approach, which is by definition adapting to change, being flexible. So instead of sticking to contracts, sticking to plan, you have to adapt and you have to collaborate with the customer instead. So this is the principles for Agile. So Agile is a philosophy or a mindset rather than any practice. You can practice Agile in a different way as long as you are adapting to change and you are not planning everything out at the beginning. You are practicing Agile. So now in terms of implementation, the approaches and methodologies differ because you might apply Agile in an incremental way, or you might apply it in an iterative way. Now you know a little bit about Agile. Let's give a further comparison between Agile and waterfall approach. The traditional approach, you first define the scope and then you are going to implement those scopes, and you are controlling or monitoring the budget and the schedule. So most probably you will end up behind a schedule and beyond budget. So you have one fixed parameter, which is the scope, and two variable parameters, which are the schedule and the cost. On the other hand, if you are going to start an Agile project, we start with how much budget we have. For example, if the client have $40,000 as a budget, that's a fixed amount, and based on that amount, we measure how many developers we need, and we know that with $40,000, we could do, for example, 5 sprints of 2 weeks, which is almost 10 weeks. So we have $40,000 and 10 weeks of work. These two parameters are fixed. And within that two parameters, we have the scope, which is variable. So we stick to some requirements at the beginning, then we change them over time until we get objective or we get the result over time, and we fine tune that result until we run out of budget. So this is how Agile works. Now, this is a general rule. In terms of implementation, you can use different approaches. You can use just a flow approach, just a Kanban board, and work on a Kanban without any specific rules. Or you can apply some rules and use a Scrum approach, for instance, or extreme development, or extreme programming, or Crystal Palace, or any other framework. So Scrum is one of the frameworks or one of the practices that allows you to practice Agile in a certain way. Scrum actually defines roles for a team by defining Scrum Master, Product Owner, and Development Team, and defines some practices and events or artifacts. And events, we have the Scrum stand-up meeting, we have the Scrum planning, and we have the retrospective meeting. And for artifacts, we have the product backlog, the increment, and the sprint backlog as well. So all these kind of practices, events, and artifacts are part of Scrum, and the Scrum Master role is to maintain all these practices. So this is the difference between Agile and Scrum. Agile is a concept, is a mindset, is a philosophy. Scrum is an implementation of Agile. How is a Scrum team structured? A Scrum team is composed of a Scrum Master, Product Owner, and Development team. The Scrum Master is the person who is traditionally called Project Manager, but we are not calling it Project Manager here because their role is not to manage the project like the traditional project management way, but their role is to maintain the Scrum processes, and that's why we call it Master of Scrum or Scrum Master. So their role is to maintain processes, improve processes, facilitate the work of the team, and remove any bottlenecks. So these are the main duties of the Scrum Master. And the product owner, on the other hand, is the one who is going to be responsible on the requirements. The product owner is the owner of the product who is responsible on achieving the goal of the product. So they represent all the stakeholders, they represent the sponsor, they collect requirements, and they communicate those requirements to the development team. The product owner is the one who is going to prioritize all requirements. And that's why we need a very collaborative clients employing Scrum, because the product owner is usually the representative of the client. So their presence and their commitment is required. Finally, the Scrum development team. Initially, it was called development because Scrum was widely used in the IT industry, but you can use it for other industries as well, and you still call it development team. And those are the people who are responsible on executing the tasks or performing the work. And this team should be cross-functional, which means that they have all the knowledge required to produce the deliverables, and they should also be self-organizing, which means that they take responsibility on doing the work throughout the sprint, and they should not take any external orders from stakeholders or from even the Scrum Master to do their work. So they do their work themselves based on their collaboration and not based on orders given to them from the Scrum Master or stakeholders. So that's the composition of the Scrum team. We have the Scrum Master, the Product Owner, and the Development team. How to define and prioritize tasks on the product backlog. That's a huge topic, but let me explain it in just a few sentences. Actually, gathering requirements happens similarly to the predictive approach, by asking stakeholders, asking end users, trying to send questions, surveys, having focus groups, talking to anyone involved in the project, and what features or what functionalities you'd like to accomplish in the project that could give value to the end users. So gathering all these requirements will be put in the product backlog. So once you have all this kind of stuff in the product backlog, you will set a priority or a high-level priority. You will say that in the first release, I'm going to create such feature, and you collect all the user stories in the product backlog related to that feature and assign it to the first release or assign it to the second release and so on. So after categorizing the product backlog into releases, now you have to prioritize more what comes first in the release, because release is a group of user stories that would be accomplished in many sprints. So you have to prioritize what user story comes in the first sprint and what user story could come later on. So in order to prioritize user stories, you can use some techniques such as the Moscow classification, which is labeling user story either must have, should have, could have, or
or won't have. So this is kind of prioritizing user story. But also you can use other technique which is based on complexity and value. If a user story is complex, which means risky, and it has value, then you should start with that user story, because user stories with risk and complexity and with very added value, they will show you from the beginning whether it's relevant to follow with the project or not. So first, you have to do the user stories with high value and high risk. Second, you take care of user stories with high value and low risk. Third, you do the user stories with low value and low risk. And finally, user stories with low value and high risk, you should get rid of them. No need to waste your time and energy on user stories that have on little value. So these are techniques for prioritizing user stories and prioritizing backlog. And this is an important topic for product owner, because if you don't take precaution and take your time in prioritizing user stories, you might end up working on something that you don't need in the future, or wasting so many time on a project that will not be accomplished because of some risks that are postponed in the future. Finally, don't forget to refine your product backlog continuously. Over time, features will be no longer needed and other features will emerge. So try from time to time doing a refinement meeting with product owner and development team, and they discuss whether there are new requirements and new user stories, and if there are some requirements in the product backlog that should be dropped off. So this is an important practice, backlog refinement, that should be done on a regular basis. How long should a sprint be? There is no exact answer. Actually, when you are applying Scrum, the duration of a sprint goes from 1 week to 4 weeks. And generally, IT companies opt for 2 weeks, but it really depends. In some cases, they go for 1 week, and in some other cases, they go for 4 weeks. So why they opt for longer sprint or shorter sprint? The short answer to this question is the rate of change or the rate of new requests. Actually, if you are going to have a very long sprint, most probably during this sprint, the customer will come to you and say, is it possible that we get a new feature into this sprint and not waiting another 2 weeks or 3 weeks until the sprint ends to get this feature? So this happens. And as a Scrum Master, you should protect your team during the sprint from this kind of distractions. And in this case, if you find that your sprint is very long, so the product owner always come and ask for changes, you need to reduce the duration of the sprint. If the duration of the sprint is 1 week, it will be easy. Like the customer could just wait until the next week in order to get a new requirement into the pipeline, and the team will work on it. So if the rate of change is very high, you should opt for a short sprint. If the rate of change is very low, then you should opt for a longer sprint.